1-800-696-4MTA. MTA, 50 years helping you get where you need to go.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
Good morning. Welcome to the First 5 Mendocino Community Hour. I'm your host, Townley Saye, and I'm joined with my colleague, Megan Carson. This is your monthly connection to the people and programs building a stronger future for our youngest children and their families. First 5 Mendocino is all about supporting parents and caregivers in Mendocino County because we know that the impact made during the first 5 years of a child's life will last a lifetime. Each month, we will explore the 5 pillars of early childhood, and for us, they include health and wellness, early learning and care, parent education and support, trauma-informed care, and community advocacy. Stay with us to find resources, hear stories, and hopefully get inspired. So good morning, Megan. How are you this morning?
Good. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So we are going to be talking about a framework today called HOPE. And it's an acronym that stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences. And there's a few reasons why we're wanting to talk about this. One, it's just to plant seeds of prevention, resilience, and to really bring home the power of positive experiences. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the framework, obviously, and some of the things that have been built to support the framework. Some research around adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress. We'll define a few of those throughout the show. And then we'll talk about some prevention through some community investment, maybe some things that we can do, investment that aren't monetarily investments, but they are just like programmatic shifts that are investing in our community. We'll also talk a little bit about type 1 and type 2 thinking that is tied to the HOPE framework. And really, I think we'd like to kind of explore the connection between healthy workplaces and how they support healthier families and communities. So we hope we stay with us for the hour and kind of like join in. So, yeah, good morning, Megan. How was your morning? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it was good. A couple of my kids actually slept through their alarms. Their alarms weren't set. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a slow start for us, but, I actually had a moment where I was like, oh, this is a really good time to like pull from some of these, like, okay, we're going to just take a big deep breath and we're not going to make the morning more stressful than it already feels. And so kind of adding in some of those buffers, I'm grateful has become like a natural part of our home environment. So
I love that word, buffers.
Yeah.
You want to explain to our listeners, like, what is a buffer? What would you define as a buffer?
Yeah. I mean, I think of like extra padding, right? Like just putting on like,
an extra layer when it's cold.
Yeah, exactly. Or just an extra like deep breath that can be that space in between a reaction and, you know, a calm response. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. I think that I would like to invite anybody listening in to really take a second, take like 10 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds. It doesn't even take that much much time to really think about a positive moment that you've had in the last 48 hours. And sometimes it can be a really small thing, like someone held the door open for you. Or you heard a child's laughter. My boyfriend and I went out to dinner last night and there was the cutest 4-month-old at the table next to us, just flirting with us all night during dinner. And it just brought me so much joy, just noticing that, you know?
Right.
Just noticing that. You know, it can be something as simple as like work, like a coworker just checked in with you, or just like kind of like, you know, just checked in how you're doing. And sometimes it can just be that first sip of coffee. I don't know if how you are, Megan, but I make my cup of coffee and I won't take the first sip until I'm sitting down.
Oh, I love that.
Because I'm going all the time.
Right.
It's just like, okay, that first sip is going to be the one that I really tune into.
Right.
And then the rest of the cup I'm just going to devour, of course. But
I love that.
Well,
I think that's where this hope framework, I think, really comes into play is, like, I think life in general, and we're creatures of survival, right? So our brains are wired for survival.
Absolutely.
Our brains are wired to look for danger, to look for the negative, and so understanding that we can imprint or rewire our brain towards resilience and hope and joy, but that we have to like be intentional about manually imprinting that wiring. And I think it comes from those exact types of moments where we intentionally sit down, take the sip of coffee or whatever, and really lean into that moment.
Yeah.
And then how much better, like how much more buffer now do you have?
It's a great way just to integrate, right? Just to integrate that sensation of space, of peace, of whatever it is, right?
And such simple, tiny moments, but we have to like consciously
really
like pause and notice and lean into it. I think that's the key or we're going to miss them because our brains aren't wired to track them.
Right. But we can rewire them.
Exactly.
Which is the amazing about us. Yeah. And I love the idea of the hope framework because it really drives home the point. A lot of the work that we do at First Five does, but, this framework in particular is explaining that positive experiences are not extra.
Exactly.
They are actually protective factors that improve long-term health outcomes. And for those listeners who don't know what a protective factor is, it's anything that's going to create a buffer, like Megan was saying, anything that's going to a healthy, I'm like stumbling with protective factors, but it could be a caring adult, a caring person that you can just like touch and, check in with. It can be having just access to like, a piece, some kind of like, shelter, food, all of those things, right? A hobby, interest, art, nature is such a protective factor. Yeah. So, these aren't extras. These are things that keep us going and keep us functioning. So I love that.
Actually, on that note, I was thinking of a quote, this morning as we were knowing we were coming in to have this conversation. And I was thinking of a quote, by MC McDonald in her book, The Joy Reset, because she does a lot of work around the tiny little joys. And I think that's exactly pairs so well with the hope framework. But this quote that she has that says, hope, optimism, imagination, and creativity get defined as luxury emotions, but they are very gritty and very tenacious. They meet us in our darkest moments. And if we can understand that and recognize that, then we can facilitate our own healing. So I think just the idea that we don't have to wait until life is better to like look for the hopeful or the joyful, that those are actually the things that get us through the darkest moments of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in those darkest times, joy and hope are audaciously there still in the room with us. Absolutely. Yep. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the HOPE, where this framework kind of came from. So the HOPE is a National Resource Center. It's based at Tufts Medical Center. And so it's the HOPE National Resource Center, and it sees its goal is to see a world that honors and promotes positive experiences as necessary for health and well-being. So very much like what you said with that quote, it is part of our healing. It is part of our well-being. It's embedded in that. And what I love about this framework is it's based on research, and research shows that positive childhood experiences drive healthy child development and lessen the lifelong effects of adverse child experiences. But what I love about this framework is because, yes, it's based on this research of positive childhood experiences. But what we're going to talk about today is how those childhood experiences, where is the spectrum of that, right? And all of the things that end up touching a child's experience. And that comes from, often a top-down effect. A lot of people who are in the workforce are also caring for young children, right? And so how, their workforce experience is can often come in and trickle into home environments. And so, it's not just understanding child development, it's understanding everything that affects the relationship between a caregiver and a child, right? So HOPE aims to inspire a movement that changes how people and organizations advance health and well-being for children, families, communities through, a lot of the research and resources. And so we're hoping that listeners today can just have a better understanding of the building blocks of HOPE. There's 4 of them. Did you want to talk more about the building blocks?
Sure. So the 4 building blocks of HOPE are safe. And so 1 is safe and supportive relationships. 2, safe, stable, equitable environments. 3, opportunities for engagement. And 4, opportunities for emotional growth. So, there's lots of different examples that we can pull into those 4 buckets, if we want to call them that. But like the safe, stable, equitable environments would be like access to parks and green space and activities.
Yep.
Opportunities for engagement might be like joining a sports team or being a part of a faith community. And emotional growth, just acknowledging that emotional resilience is as a key part of
create opportunities for like social connections and what have you. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And so another thing that's really embedded in this framework is how we approach problems, right? And, this framework identifies 2 types of kind of thinking, right? And Megan and I are going to walk you through a couple of different scenarios and some instances of like what a type 1 thinking is versus a type 2 thinking.
Well, and before we get into the scenarios, I wanted to give listeners, when we did this training with, Dr. Saye, part of our training, we were shown a cartoon of kind of a very chaotic home environment. There's like bugs crawling on the floor and holes in the walls and cracks in the ceiling and pizza on the floor and just different things happening and
chemicals around.
Right. And they asked us like what we noticed. And I only noticed the negative. And then they said, okay, what's, look at it again and now notice what's going well here.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even see it even with the prompt. I was like, nothing. It's a mess.
Right. But you're understanding then like there's food, there's pizza, right? There's access to food.
Right.
That one of the kids is wearing glasses and there's access to medical care. Right.
There was a picture of like a religious person on the wall. Their families together. They're watching TV.
Yeah.
There's cleaning supplies so they can clean their home. But I didn't see it at all. And it was sort of this awakening moment for me of, oh wow, I definitely need to work on this type 2 thinking.
Yeah.
So,
I thank you for that centering. And, this also shows up in the community resilience model that we talked about earlier in another show is like, what else is true, right? It's not just the negative. There are parts of it. We're made up of both of these pieces. Yeah. Type 1 thinking is like what you just explained. It's kind of fast. It's automatic. Sometimes it's emotional, right? Like, I see holes in the wall.
It's like the survival. It's the survival brain, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. It can be very pattern based. And like you said, very survival. So, and some of the examples might be like, some of them are actually innately in us, right? Like slamming brakes while driving, right? Like that's a type 2. You're just kind of like, maybe you're a little bit too sensitive to that, or type 1. Yeah. Type 1 thinking. It might be too kind of reactive, but you're in that survival place, right? Catching a falling child or what have you. Quickly reading someone's tones or what have you. But type 1 thinking really relies heavily on that assumption and that bias, right? And so really delving into type 2 thinking it's more slower. It stays kind of more in the curiosity end of things. It can be very reflective. Like, okay, like, is this my stuff? Am I seeing things as they really are? And it can be much more intentional and analytical. And so this is really where we start talking about like, where empathy and prevention and problem solving live, because you're really working into that prefrontal cortex of problem solving and not being as reactive in
Right.
your survival brain. Yep, absolutely. So one of the examples we were thinking was like, okay, so you have a grocery store parent, like the parent is at the grocery store, the child is maybe
Wanting the lollipop.
Wanting the lollipops and grabbing things, maybe a little whiny or upset, and type 1 thinking might be that parent has no control over that child.
Sure.
Have we all seen this?
Right. Right.
You're just like,
Or Bennett.
Oh my God. Absolutely. Yes. I remember one time, we were at a toy store and it was a really small store. It was really crammed. We had to go in there for, the typical birthday present.
Right.
And we went in there and my child was obviously just grabbing everything and I had to pick them up. And when I picked them up, they actually kicked another child in the head. It just escalated into this whole scene. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can only think about what people were thinking of me.
Sure.
Like that parent has no control over their child.
Right.
But a type 2 might want be, thinking would be, I wonder if that parent's exhausted, overwhelmed, or just lacking support or what have you.
Right.
And that was also true for me in that moment, right? Both of these things, I didn't have control over my child and I was completely overwhelmed.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
But instead of it being this shame-based judgment that removes empathy and connection and compassion.
Absolutely.
Right. Type 2 thinking helps us to take a step back and see, like you said, what else is true about this parent or this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into more examples, I just wanted to, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the first 5 minutes in a community hour. We are talking about the HOPE framework. And HOPE stands for positive outcomes from,
Healthy outcomes
from positive experiences. Thank you. So I'm trying to multitask here. Because I also just wanted to do a plug for KZYX. Just a reminder that this show is community supported. KZYX relies on listener donations. And so we encourage you to donate at www.kzyx.org if you can. So, and we just really appreciate you listening. And what we're doing is we're talking about type 1 and type 2 thinking that's, really tied to the HOPE framework. Type 1 thinking is that fast, survival, reactive thinking, where type 2 is a little more reflective, a little more intentional, and stays in that realm of curiosity. So we just talked about the grocery store parent. What about workplace? What are some type 1, type 2 thinking?
Yeah, like
experiences that come from workplaces.
It could be like, oh my gosh, that coworker or that employee is lazy. Look at how little they're doing. Yep.
And a type 2 thinking would be like, maybe is there burnout involved? Do they have stresses at home that are bleeding into their work life? Is there caregiving stress? Is there maybe a grief or some kind of chronic stress affecting their performance, right? So being more curious about that versus just jumping to that conclusion. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love the next one is around teen behavior because I hear this so much when we're doing, Triple P teen, right? My teenager is so disrespectful. So disrespectful.
Right.
What was some of the type 2 thinkings? Do you think that we could rearrange that thought pattern?
Right. I mean, it could just be like what's going on at school, what's going on with friends, what's the stress level or the anxiety level. Or, like even this morning when as soon as I didn't realize that one of my kids wasn't awake yet. And when I went into check, I was like, oh shoot, he's still asleep. Yeah. And so I gently woke him up and let him know what time it was. And he immediately was like, and my first judgment could have been like, oh, well, that was rude. I just woke you up. Right. But instead I immediately realized like, oh, he's stressed out. What can I do to ease that stress? Yes, exactly. Instead of adding my judgment or my, hurt feelings to the mix. Instead, just, hey, how can I help you get ready? What can I do to help this go smoothly?
And I think, with especially the teenagers, it's really difficult because they are going through such a reconstruction of the nervous system. Yeah. Through the teenagers. They need more sleep, right? They need more time to kind of develop those emotional regulation skills, right? Because they're restructuring their brain. All those hormones that you see your tween developing, it's because they're actually developing more intently. They're prefrontal cortex.
Right. Exactly.
And so they're developing this critical thinking. So it might be their trigger point is they may seem like they're being disrespectful, but they're really pushing a boundary and they're like, they're needing some guidance. And so really thinking about it through that different and more empathetic lens, I think is helpful.
Right. Well, and I think then that provides an opportunity for me as a parent to model and give them like something, some other way of, to slow down themselves and see, oh, I don't have to be stressed to the max in this situation.
Right.
And can those mirror neurons from a parent that's regulated can actually help them, understand and pull from that kind of regulated response themselves when they see it modeled.
Yeah. I love the concept, or not the concept, but I love the fact that there are mirror neurons in our nervous system, right? And I think a lot of our listeners may or may not understand what a mirror neuron is. And so just so you know, that a mirror neuron is those neurons that will reflect what they see, right? So very much like that dinner with the 4-month-old. Even at 4 months old, I'd smile and the baby would smile.
Right.
The baby would smile and I would smile. That's what those mirror neurons are doing. And so that's where that co-regulation piece can be really strengthened, especially in that teenage, like when you're modeling the behavior you want your teenager to kind of do, right? It ignites those mirror neurons to kind 100%. Of like fire off. So I love that. That's our bodies are so amazingly engineered.
Yeah. Well, and I've learned from just experience, like if I want a respectful, grateful teenager, I am respectful and grateful to them.
We practice it.
And then they return it.
Absolutely.
And I can't demand it and not, show it to them and expect it from them in return. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some other places that these type 1, type 2 thinkings come up, and I see this a lot too, is like, when we're meeting with like educators or we're meeting with like school, attendees or what have you, like personnel, sometimes it'll just be like parents just don't care. Like if we're talking about attendance records, they just don't care if their kids go to school, or it's kind of like a flat kind of like excuse, and really, if you just scratch the surface a little bit, there could be some very, if you're just curious, why are kids struggling to get to school?
Right.
There could be transportation issues. There could be housing instability. There could be chronic illness, or some kind of fear happening, about going to school or what have you.
Right.
And maybe work schedules, right? Like just again, transportation and work schedule. Everyone's kind of sometimes in survival mode.
Yeah.
So I think when we just simplify it as parents don't care, we lose a huge opportunity of really how to co-create a solution that works both for families and educators, and that then still does prioritize the child's development and education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There's always other stories and explanations beneath the surface, for sure.
And there's always some creative solutions that we can kind of come together and create. Yeah, absolutely. Community homelessness is another one, right? We have this bias against, the homeless community. Like, why won't they just get a job or what have you? And, that's a real key issue, is about like, some type 2 thinking might be like, well, what systems failed these individuals, right?
Right. What home did they come from?
Yes.
What abuse did they go through, or neglect, or,
access to mental health, trauma. Was there a foster care history? I mean, we can look at the statistics around this. So really being curious and, again, scratching that surface, because that's where the co-creation of solutions can really be much more effective. What about healthcare? This is a really interesting one,
Yeah. That patient that
just won't do it.
Right. Isn't interested. But, if you really tune into them, like, is there a language barrier? Is there a cultural barrier? What else is going on that is factoring into their decision to not agree to something?
Well, and I see this very, when we look at parenting supports and parenting education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the key tenets of Triple P is it realistic?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So often, especially in the healthcare industry, we're like setting them up for further failure of like maybe dosage or affordability of prescriptions or what have you.
Right. Or one intervention that leads to a dozen other interventions.
Right. So we're making sure, is it realistic, and checking for understanding from patients, to see what else. Again, that co-creation of solutions.
Then, I mean, we all have different relationships that we navigate.
Oh, yes.
Romantic or otherwise. And it's really easy to misread a mood or a behavior. And
absolutely,
so if somebody's, had a long day and they come home from work, and the spouse or partner is like, oh, I must have done something wrong. They're ignoring me or upset with me. But what else could be true?
What else could be true? Exactly. What a great thing to just start asking. What else could be true? Right? Such a simple way to kind of ignite that type 2 thinking. What else could be true? Are they overwhelmed? Are they anxious? Do they have decision fatigue?
Right.
Are they emotionally flooded?
How was their day at work?
Right. Exactly. So I think that, it's important to kind of like just understand, and hopefully these examples of like how this type 1 and type 2 thinking shows up across a variety of different situations, right? From, interpersonal to community and what have you, kind of helps. I hope listeners are kind of starting to think, what else is true about, what I'm perceiving?
Well, yeah, right? Because when I think back to before I had an awareness of this, I like how many moments escalated unnecessarily. Absolutely. Because I would misread or misjudge or misunderstand somebody else. And then, coming from a place of defensiveness or survival or frustration would only add to the problem. Right. Instead of being able to take that step back and be reflective and say, what else is going on?
Yeah. What else is going on? And again, sometimes when we have a big problem, it doesn't require a big solution. And I think that we, like you said, overcomplicate, like, how are we going to fix this? But sometimes if we just step back and ask if you could be curious about it, it might just come very, very flooded.
And maybe even not even having a response, like pulling back enough to just giving space.
Yeah.
That could solve this.
Sometimes can solve itself. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what we're really also kind of scratching the surface of is, again, I always want to say we're going to talk about hope, but really we're going to talk about Triple P, and we're going to talk about community resiliency model. We're going to talk about MC McDonald, and I'm going to pull in Laura, Vandernoot Lipsky's work when she talked about, the community nervous system, the idea of regulating on the community level, right? And so that's what this type 1, type 2 thinking can really guide us to do.
It's all connected. And I love that. That's what I love the most about how we've gathered all these really powerful frameworks that are rooted in this sort of realm of positive psychology. Yeah. But it's full of tools. Absolutely. And immediately implementable things.
Totally. Yeah. So when communities can stay stuck in this type 1 thinking, it tends to punish symptoms, right? Rather than helping us invest in those prevention solutions. Absolutely. Right? So really being curious. And so I love that part, kind of helps us shift that nervous system and start regulating us on the community level, right? Yeah. So it's, almost 9:30, but I just wanted to remind, listeners that you're listening to the first 5 Mendocino Community Hour here on KZYX. If you feel like donating, because this is a community supported radio, please feel free to go to kzyx.org and feel free to donate. This, all of these shows that you get to listen to are all community sponsored. So it's wonderful. So, we can't talk about positive childhood experiences without talking about a little bit. I don't want to dive too deep into the dark end of adverse childhood experiences, but we can't just ignore them. Sure. Right. Absolutely. And so, and I'll just really, I think hopefully enough of our listeners have listened or are aware of what ACEs are. I know that there's a lot of talk now about toxic stress and what it looks like. But adverse childhood experiences is a study that was done, in I want to say the late 90s. And it measured 10 different kind of experiences, and it measured kind of a spectrum of like, abuse, neglect, domestic violence, if there was substance abuse in the home, any mental illness in the household, if there was incarceration, community violence, discrimination, poverty. Now, there were still lots of things that were not measured in the ACEs study that still affect that can cause adversity. So it's not whole and complete, and there are definitely gaps in it. But it was very eye-opening as understanding what happens in childhood has significant health outcomes later on in life. Like it changes the way our nervous system metabolizes stress. And so it starts kind of affecting, cancer rates and, heart attack and diabetes. And it starts really affecting significant health outcomes. And so just understanding that, but it's also not about blaming your parents.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's about understanding stress and systems. And so I want to be really clear about, parents are often doing the best that they can do with the resources they have available. And adversity is going to happen. But again, in light of that, you can also create these buffers, these positive childhood experiences. And so when we talk about and move beyond blame at the community level, prevention discussions can talk about affordable housing, right? Things that are usually very stressful for families.
Right.
As maybe listeners don't understand, but families with young children are probably at their poorest that they're ever going to be in child rearing.
True.
Right? Usually one person has to stay home.
Right.
And then if they have to go to work.
Diapers are expensive. Formulas,
childcare. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. So, just understanding, living wages, access to childcare. We talked a little bit about this, having safe outdoor spaces, safe parks, transportation options, and just strong community networks, and I think that a lot of those are really challenging in rural areas like we live in Mendocino County. And I think that that's the biggest, investment that we can make is in our community, like knowing our neighbors,
right.
Understanding like who's available to help us, pull things from if we have family far away or what have you. Because I really feel like if we don't have anything, we have each other.
Right. Right.
Right. And so I just think that is really great. So, prevention is not just, parenting classes. It's building communities where families can breathe.
Yep.
So obviously we need services and resources, but I think leaning into one another more often can often be a huge buffer and a huge, just an area of resource.
Yeah. I think that's a really important piece. I think especially when there's, risks of federal programs cutting in really dire ways for some families. Yeah. How can we fill that gap or those needs of some of those families? And that's where knowing our neighbors and knowing how we can reach out into our own individual communities can help kind of strengthen that.
Absolutely.
That community web of strength. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we just, with ACEs, it talks a lot about toxic stress. And I think that toxic stress is something that's important to understand in light of what is general stress, right? So there are some positive stresses that people experience.
During the radio show
is very it's kind of stressful in here, people. And it shouldn't be. I mean, I often think we'll be sitting in our office and be like, we could have recorded this whole conversation right now. Right. Because we're solving all the problems of the world. But yes, it is a little bit of a healthy stress, absolutely a positive stress. And so it can be stuff like for a child, like a first day of school, right? That's, it's a little bit stressful, but it's also a healthy stress. It's temporary. It's an opportunity for growth. Learning, growing pains are always a little bit more of seen as a positive stress. Learning a new skill, like a new language or an instrument or what have you. And just like you said, radio speaking. But then there's also tolerable stresses. So they're maybe a little bit more prolonged, but they can be really buffered by supports, such as like a loss of a pet, maybe a divorce with some strong support systems in place, So it's tolerable stress, we know there's going to be an end to it, right? And I think that's sometimes confused with toxic stress, right? So it's not like you could ever remove any stress from our bodies, right? But I think it's good for people to understand that some stress is good. It helps strengthen and build resilience in our systems, while prolonged, relentless, no rest from stress is that stress that really turns into that toxic, right?
Well, and even like, I like the idea of it being, maybe it could be a tolerable, like a toxic stress could be a tolerable stress for somebody if they have the right support helping them through it. And so I think that distinguishing piece of like kind of, just referring back to MC McDonald, the relational home.
Yes.
That if you have somebody that helps you through something, that can turn, that can be the only difference between a toxic and a tolerable stress.
Yeah.
So just that piece of like, even if you don't feel like you have all the right tools for somebody that is going through something hard, like your pure presence can be the thing that has the biggest impact.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I love this, our bodies are designed to hit the gas pedal during danger, but they're not designed to stay at 90 miles an hour forever.
Sure.
I might argue with that when I'm driving sometimes, but that's okay. That's neither here nor there. But it's that whole thing, like our bodies are innately and intuitively designed to respond to danger, right? But, just like a cheetah after a race or a whatever, we have to also rest and regenerate and have that pause so we can actually recover, right? That rest and recover, which I think Laura talked about. So that's just a little bit about the different types of stresses and what have you. But we also want to drive home the message that adversity is not destiny. So, just because you might have had stressful situations and grew up in the foster care system, there is no reason why that should limit you. And your brain can heal. And your ability to build relationships can happen, and relationships do matter. And positive experiences matter at every single age. And that's what I love about this HOPE framework that says, like, even if you didn't have a positive childhood experiences, you could also probably be that caring adult who's created them and paying it forward in somebody else's, another child's life.
Yeah.
So positive childhood experiences are those that kind of create belonging, a sense of belonging. They often build safety, so nervous systems can feel more safe. They increase that connection, and they support emotional growth. And so, there's been a lot of research done on positive childhood experiences, just like there were in ACEs. And I remember when the ACEs study came out, and I was like, just intuitively, I was like, okay, so if someone has 10 ACEs, they have a lot of health problems when they're an adult. I have 10 ACEs. I wonder what that means for me and my health. And when I reflected on my own physical health, I was like, I feel really healthy though. Like, I don't know, like I've also done a lot of counseling and all, all that kinds of stuff, but also the processing. But I didn't want to buy into it. There was something eating at me, like, that's part of the story.
Right.
That's part of the story. And so I was just really, really excited when Tufts Medical Center, had some empirical evidence to say, hey, positive childhood experiences count too.
Yeah.
And they help reduce those negative health outcomes.
Right.
And that was just so inspiring to me.
So empowering.
So empowering. And so.
Well, that they actually tracked the data.
Yeah.
Physical health data that showed that people that also had a high number of positive childhood experiences could reverse those negative physical health, outcomes.
Predictors. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's huge.
I think it's important to know what are they? So there's 7 that Tufts University, the HOPE framework has come out with. 7, what they call positive childhood experiences that you can think of these 7 and kind of reflect on your own childhood, identify what childhood experiences you had or what you are currently providing for your children. Or if you're a teacher, like reflecting on the students you teach or the kids that you see in your practice, and then you can find the gaps. And maybe when you find those gaps, you can help fill in those gaps for that child. So here's the 7. One is if you feel able to talk to your family about feelings. 2, if you feel your family stood by you during difficult times. 3, if you enjoy participating in community traditions. 4, if you feel a sense of belonging, if you felt a sense of belonging in high school. 5, if you feel or felt supported by friends. 6, if you have at least 2 non-parent adults who took genuine interest in you. And 7, if you feel or felt safe and protected by an adult in your home.
Mm-hmm.
So really good pieces to reflect on. And I think shows, as you were saying, even if you have a high ACEs score, what else is true?
What else is true?
What other ways did you have a positive childhood experience with a grandparent or a coach or a teacher or, supportive friends or, sports team?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I often reflect, just obviously when I'm reading all of these, data and research findings and thinking about reflecting on my own childhood and my own, young adulthood and understanding that, there were some really toxic adults in my family. And so really understanding that when I look back and I somehow created this beautiful web of friendships, right? That aren't my family, but they feel very family-like and they stand by me and they're decades old and I don't even have to they're just like a relative that you see, like that great aunt you only see like once or twice, every 5 or 6 years. But every time you do, there's that instant connection and that instant bond. And that's what a PCE is. That's what a buffer is, right?
Yeah.
And I love that, adults with these levels of positive childhood experiences and for themselves or creating them for others, they report dramatically better mental health outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think in our community, it's too that has a huge challenge of not having enough mental health providers in it to provide those things, knowing that we can all collectively be investing in better mental health outcomes as we reach out of this, sect of just like understanding how we can be a buffer in someone's life.
Yeah.
How we can stop and reflect on those tiny little joys and how we build our own resilience through these small practices of curiosity and type 2 thinking, right?
Absolutely.
So,
I often think of the story that Galen Elmore shares when he's been.
Galen was a guest he grew up in the foster care system. He's come to Mendocino a couple of times.
Retired from the NFL and now presenter, an advocate for foster kids and improving the foster system. But there's a story he has shared when he's come to Ukiah about his elementary school years and how fraught with, he was bumped around
many households,
a dozen different foster homes and struggled to find a place where he felt seen and valued and heard. And then, the story of the Miss Peanut, the janitor.
Yes.
I think that noticed one day that he didn't have any food and she went without saying a word, just went to the vending machine and bought a bunch of stuff and then just dumped it in front of him and walked away. But like how pivotal that moment was for him to simply be seen. There was no big Galen, I'm going to take you in.
Right. Nope.
Wasn't doing it for.
Yeah. And we read all these things, small acts of kindness, all this stuff. And we brush it off as if it doesn't really mean anything. And really it means everything to somebody.
Right. And now as a grown man.
Yeah. He's
sharing a story from when he was 8 or 9 or 10.
Yeah.
That had such a huge impact on his life.
Yeah.
And, she wasn't even a main teacher in a teacher role, but kind of one of these side characters that decided to, use her sense that that there was a gap.
She had access. And I think that proximity is always,
right.
Staying in proximity of the people who might need it.
Right. And just like taking that time to be a little bit intentional. What thinking was she having? Like, oh, what kind of home does he come from? That
Right.
What his parents must really not love him, or, whatever.
Yeah.
Didn't let any of that stop her. Instead had a moment of like, I can do something.
Yeah.
What's that thing I can do that can
Absolutely
have an impact?
Yeah.
And like, if we all were able to pause to like have that same reflective question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who's struggling that I might be able to help in some small way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be a huge thing.
No.
It could just be the smallest
So
things.
quiet.
Yeah. And I love, Tina Bryson has a book called The Power of Showing Up. And sometimes resilience begins with just one person consistently showing up. Mm-hmm. And that showing up can look a variety of different ways. And I just want to plug her work as far as like just an opportunity for doing, small things. Mm-hmm. Positive experiences obviously don't stop at childhood. Adults need buffering relationships too.
Yep.
And so, I think this is where we wanted to talk about, how workplaces are so impactful on adults and how they can actually dictate, not just, what happens at home, but also how their productivity at work. So if you're just tuning in, this is the first 5 Mendocino Community Hour on KZYX. And we're always encouraging listeners to also, donate to the community radio station. So if you feel like you can donate, please go to kzyx.org and feel free to donate there. But we're talking about the HOPE framework today, healthy outcomes from positive experiences. We've been talking a little bit about type 1, type 2 thinking, and like how that shows up in a variety of different, environments. And, right now we're going to talk about how, toxic stress, but also how positive experiences for adults in the workplace can really be a prevention, strategy for a lot of things, So healthy workplaces can become these resilience building environments. And so often, so many of our workplaces are, staffed with caregivers. Mm-hmm. They are sometimes they're caring for elder, population, their parents or grandparents, and sometimes at the same time they're caring for young little ones, right? So some examples of positive workplace experiences, supervisors who check in respectfully, having predictable schedules, paid leave, providing some psychological safety, showing appreciation, mentorship. This is a big one, flexibility for families, sickness, paid leave, fair wages, and feeling valued. And oftentimes when people are experiencing dignity at work and support at work and they have predictability of whatever, they often bring more patience, more emotional regulation and energy home to their families, as well as maintaining, a more productive, work.
Well, and some of those workplace environment things can be so subtle.
Yes.
I loved the example that Laura Vandernoot Lipsky used where she was talked about what's the response of your coworkers when you take a week off for vacation? Mm-hmm. Oh, look at you.
Right.
I was so lucky you can afford to take that time off or whatever. Some of those subtle, sarcastic, emotionally manipulative things, can really drain a place.
Yeah. And they eat away at the potential joy, just waiting to be celebrated. Right.
And just having a subtle shift there of encouraging people to take time off, encouraging people to care for themselves, instead of making them feel shame or guilt for doing so. So I think even super subtle shifts of oh, do I feel some jealousy coming up because my coworker went to Portugal for 3 weeks?
I was only gone for 10 days. I'm just kidding.
But instead of but embracing that and expressing wow, that's so cool. And then making plans to go yourself instead of staying stuck in that negative mindset of just that's punitive and destructive. So I think even just really subtle ways that environment can be improved when we just celebrate each other and we celebrate the work we're doing and we encourage healthy outlets and time off.
Absolutely. I don't know if listeners have heard the vicarious trauma, when you have, you're working in high stress work environments and what have you have this trauma that kind of translates from one staff person or one experience to another, or from client to, a colleague or what have you. But there's also vicarious resilience, right?
Absolutely.
Like what you were just saying, like celebrating someone's joy and celebrating someone's, I see this when people retire, like, oh no, you can't go. Oh, really? What's your next adventure?
Right.
Right? Like, what does that look like?
Right.
So having some kind of like joy around it. And a parent who spends like 8 hours at work, potentially being criticized or stressed or unsupported, they're going to have fewer emotional resources left for themselves to regulate whatever's waiting for them at home, right?
Sure.
Versus a parent who feels respected and supported and celebrated even at work often has way more capacity for that connection that's needed for their little ones when they're caregiving. So that's really the direct connection between why private and public sectors really encouraging and investing in this whole framework can be really beneficial just for sustainability of their staff, productivity of their staff, longevity of their staff, which then directly correlates to the home where children are being supported.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
just really, connecting that. So what are some prevention investments that, communities could like ensure happens, like early childhood education, parent support programs. I think really investing in public places like libraries and parks. I love, the idea of like community gardens and just food access, mentoring situations for youth. I do love the city of Ukiah using youth as for, like in the summer safari camp and then the childcare, the
after
ACES
school,
after
school program.
That early childcare giving, situation and just being put in that position of just giving back to younger generations. That multi-generational approach is, I think, really, really, it can be a very positive experience for both.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think one of the really positive things that came out of COVID was all the extra funding that went to space to provide, the space program to be more accessible for everybody, that every child could sign up for one class and it was covered by this extra funding. Like what a gift that,
access to music, access to art. I do want to just do like a selfless plug for screens. I think that screens are great in a lot of ways, but I think they really interfere with true connection and connecting with another human heartbeat, as far as like, that shared time and having an opportunity for those mirror neurons to fire and
the playtime,
and the connection and the feeling of safe, healthy attachments,
Right before we came on the radio show, I was trying to show Townley a video. It was from the Institute of Child Psychology on Instagram, if anybody wants to look it up. But it showed these two little girls watching a movie or something on the TV, and the parents went outside and were jumping on the trampoline playfully. And they set a timer of how long will it take before they come out and play. And it counted up to like 17 seconds before both girls had come out of the house without the parents telling them, like, you need to go play outside.
Right.
The parents went out and started playing and that pulled. It was invitational for then the kids to come play with them. And what a gift, right?
Totally.
When as parents, we can show like, hey,
we know how to play too. Yeah, we can play.
Like
absolutely.
I kind of do something similar where I'll bring all the paints to the kitchen table and I'll set up myself to do some painting. Won't say anything to my kids. And then, they walk through the kitchen and they're like, ooh, I want to paint.
I want to do something.
And then
I love that.
and then they're jumping in. And so how much like we can facilitate that space by putting down our screens, putting down our phones and engaging in playful things. And then that, like you said, it builds a chance for connection. And,
absolutely.
And
I remember when my kids were younger, this, a little bit before screen times, but, if we had to go out to like a restaurant or even to like have it go to like the doctor's appointment or what have you and having to wait, I would just bring like a collection of books, like some of their favorite books. And we would just like, they would read at the dinner table, read at the doctor's book. Right. So it's like, we always think that screens are now the responsive like connection, but no, it's like we used to have books, we used to have like paper and pen and drawings and those little things.
Exactly.
So I think, when we look at those kinds of things, how complicated and simple they are. It's really easy to give a kid a screen. It's also just as easy to give them a book.
Right. Coloring book and crayons.
Yep,
right.
Exactly.
Even adults.
Even adults. And modeling that. I know I have so many little doodle books at home and that kind of stuff that sometimes we'll do. It's
the funnest thing when I go with my daughter to do birthday shopping for her friends, like how much I'm like, I want those glitter pens.
I know. Oh my gosh. I have way too many like fun pens and paints.
And lean into it.
Yes.
Like, why not? Why not buy the thing you wanted when you were 13?
Yes.
I think that's also an important part of like Tina Bryson's work, The Power of Showing Up.
Right.
Is, and going back to ACEs and PCEs, is that if there was something lacking in your childhood, you can give it to yourself now and reparent yourself in a way that is healthy and can kind of heal any of those childhood wounds.
Yeah. You don't want to see the drawer of my googly eyes at home. It lives with my hot glue gun.
I love it.
So we can, as a community, we can either spend money upstream building healthy communities or downstream responding to crisis. I mean, that's really the end all be all of it, Right. So I know we're winding down on our show, but I hope that you are, kind of like to have some takeaways as far as like, the Hope framework is really easy to embed. It's as easy as like text someone that you're thinking about them, send out a text them, eat a meal with somebody and just eat a meal, right? Read with your child, learn your neighbors' names, lead with curiosity and thinking instead of quick judgment or reaction, right? Like what comes up in that pause of curiosity, right? Kind of investing in that type 2 thinking. Ask yourself if there's a place that you'd like to volunteer. Like even just like, I love the idea of just like having extra snacks for noticing that kid who might be hungry, right? Like it doesn't even need to be like a formal volunteer thing. It can just be something so subtle.
Right.
And then, supporting emotional growth. I think it's really important to help children and adults name their emotions, normalize asking for help, and practicing repair after there's any kind of sense of conflict and what have you as well. Any last thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to say earlier when we were talking about, like if you are coming home from a hard day at work, like I've found, if I'm in that space, being really transparent with my kids of like, hey, I kind of had a hard day, and kind of normalizing that then when they've had a hard day, they can communicate that and that we can create this home environment where we can have bad days and then and know how to create space for each other, that's loving and kind and curious. And, so I think that's another way that we can build that positive childhood. Experiences. Is just giving space for human.
Yeah, absolutely.
For us all to be human and learn together and love together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you've been listening to the First 5 Mendocino Community Hour. As we sign off, we'll start our Pharrell Williams here in a little bit, but we just want to leave you with this one thing to just think about for the next few minutes is like, what's one positive moment that you've had in the last 48 hours? Integrate that and just kind of ruminate on that and see what comes up for your nervous system. So thank you for listening.
Feel like happiness is the truth because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring me down. Can't none
You're tuned in to KZYX, Philo 90.7 FM, KZYZ, Willits and Ukiah 91.5 FM, and Fort Bragg at 88.1 FM. We also stream on the web at kzyx.org. You're listening to Mendocino County Public Broadcasting, listener-supported community radio.